Basically, ads had led to low quality experiences being proliferated everywhere, which I think we all see day in and day out. There's still lots of amazing things online, but it's rewarded the wrong things. How many YouTube views do you need to make like $500? Is it like 10 million? Like it's pretty astronomical, the number of views you need and then the amount of corruption you get to your experience to rely on ads. But now anyone can say, oh, you can pay me less than a penny because you have this money embedded in the web and it's not stuck into this product. Is it reasonable that a lot of these different services, you could do 20, 50x more earnings for the person who's creating it? And I believe the answer is 100% yes. I think we're in a bull market for Lightning experiences.
Jared Nusinoff is the founder and CEO of Mash, a Lightning-powered platform helping anyone on the internet earn more for the content they create. In our conversation, Jared explained exactly how Mash works. He explained how creators on the internet are going to be able to benefit from Mash in the same way that retailers on the internet have benefited from the likes of Shopify and Etsy, and how the internet is going to change when native payments are ubiquitous. Jared also asked to have his SAT split sent to the Human Rights Foundation, so if you enjoy this show, if you learn something new, the best way you can support it and the Human Rights Foundation is by sending in SATs over the Lightning Network. You can use any Podcasting 2.0 app. My favorite is Fountain, but there are many of them. If you want to earn some sats, the best way you can do that is by following me on Twitter. Every time I'm about to film with a guest, I'll send out a tweet one day before letting you know to ask questions for that guest over Fountain. And all those questions will be asked to the guest when I record, and I'll pick one of those questions and I'll add that listener to the show splits for the upcoming episode. Real quick before we get into today's show is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the industry standard and next generation provider for Lightning Network infrastructure. Today's show is also sponsored by Zebedee. That's Zebedee, and Zebedee is your portal into the world of Bitcoin gaming. We'll have more from Voltage and Zebedee later in the show. Jared, thank you for joining me today. I'm so excited to talk about Mash and all the things you're building. But before we get into that, why don't we discuss your background? Because you've got an interesting background. You've worked, I believe, at Google, you worked on an outdoor adventure company, and now you're building a company on the Lightning Network. Talk to me about how those three are connected, because on the surface, it seems like those were in very different spheres.
Well, Kevin, it's great to be on. I know we've talked about it for a bit, so I want to appreciate your time and the time to share this with everyone who's listening. And so, I've sort of gone down a variety of different paths throughout my career. So a lot of it is, first and foremost, I got to do something that I actually really, really enjoy, that I think provides positive value to people. So my first job was leading canoe trips in the middle of the wilderness of Canada. So taking people on 3 to 10 day trips by canoe, bring all your stuff, set up your tents, move site to site, cook your food on a fire, and absolutely fell in love with sort of the freedom of the outdoors and freedom of your time to eat when you want to eat, sleep when you want to sleep, etc. I've always been interested in technology. So as a kid, I was selling things online like the late 90s and actually saw lots of the challenges with payments infrastructure back then. So that's sort of a touch point. And then I ended up at Google for 7.5 years. And I saw very clearly as I was working a bit on display ads, and I also spent a lot of time in consumer products for Google Fiber, leading in their mobile efforts, the funding of disinformation online, and how basically ads had led to low quality experiences being proliferated everywhere, which I think we all see day in and day out. There's still lots of amazing things online, but it's rewarded the wrong things. And then sort of after my time at Google, I was in many ways disenfranchised with tech. I didn't see anything that really got me excited that I thought could create a really positive experience for people around the world. And so I went back to sort of my early career as like the summer job and said, why can't I create an experience that is a real, actual outdoor, sort of a summer camp on wheels type of thing in Canada when I looked at what was happening in New Zealand? And so I went on that journey to build it out. We were actually scaling. We had product market fit for a bootstrap self-funded business where I was buying buses. And the first year I drove them around the country with people from around the world, and then had a bunch of guides. But it was March 2020 when I'm like, I shouldn't buy those 4 extra buses, which I'm very happy I didn't. And went down a path of learning about Bitcoin and Lightning and all these other things. And I saw that it gave us the technology and the opportunity to solve a lot of the problems online with monetization. And so I went just through a process of learning about all the different Lightning products, about the tech, exploring different experimentations, and sort of mapping it back. And then now we're here with Mash.
Yeah. So for listeners who aren't familiar, can you explain at a high level what Mash is building and how it works?
Sure. So Mash's mission is to remonetize the web, high level. And we're doing that by enabling anyone who creates content, little mini apps and tools online, whether it's video and education experiences or broader applications, to charge based on usage, sort of pay as you enjoy for any amount. So the goal of that is to allow them to earn their value, earn what they provide to their users, which lots of people talk about as value for value. And the other side of that is we want to make it as easy as possible for any consumer, any user around the world to get access to a Lightning wallet to contribute to those people who create these amazing experiences. And so that leads to a product of an embeddable Lightning wallet that is interoperable, where you can send money anywhere around the world. And you can send the money and pay for experiences directly to those people who build, develop, and create those content and experiences seamlessly.
Right. And so when you think about, this is like integrated with Lightning Network, what makes Lightning a necessary ingredient for this? Where, if we look pre-Lightning Network, we've seen examples of companies building, somewhat similar creator tools, things like Patreon and Substack, and things where you can pay for internet native goods. What makes Lightning kind of like that necessary ingredient here for Mash?
So I think there's a few things. One, which is sort of an aside to this, is I am a Bitcoiner, and I believe that supporting Bitcoin is incredibly important, if not the most important thing for humanity right now. But now I'll jump back to answering the actual question, which is, in the past, you had a minimum purchase amount. It was one time. It required filling out a credit card or loading up credits into something. It wasn't global. It wasn't programmable. So you had this commitment barrier, this minimum amount to purchase, which then had chargebacks and costs. And most people couldn't even get on those networks. Like, why did Square exist? It was none of these people had a way to actually even accept credit cards. And that's still the case for lots of industries and lots of individuals. It's incredibly expensive. But back to the why Lightning and why now. First is the properties of Lightning being programmable. So you can have it be sent in a variety of different mechanisms. It being decentralized and interoperable. So you can now take your money, send it between different products. It's not locked in, so there is no minimum purchase. It's just an asset that you can use in different ways. And the third piece is what I like to call embedded density. And so it helps solve a cold start problem of, now I have, in the past it used to be, I have these tokens that can only be used on this place. Like I have Fortnite credits that can only be used in Fortnite. And you had to have a minimum love for Fortnite to put your money in, or a minimum love for Reddit to buy like your flair or your emojis. But now anyone can say, you can pay me less than a penny because you have this money embedded in the web and it's not stuck into this product. Or you can say, I'm going to buy Bitcoin on Shopify because this wallet now can let me do that. So you can use it so many more places. And the power of that is going to explode over the next few years, I believe.
Right. And so you can kind of take your money from one service to another too, right? Like I can earn on, service A and then spend on service B, right? Like there's no limitations or silos.
Exactly. So let's say you had, you were earning with Mash for some reason. Pretty soon you'll be able to plug in your node and the money will flow right to you, and then you can send your money anywhere else. Or a consumer can take their money from, let's say, another wallet like Zebedee, send it into Mash, activate a wallet, and then start using it without having any sort of on-ramp requirement. It's about full interoperability, or we can just connect with them and just pull invoices from them. So we have this really cool demo of where we want to go with this. Obviously, it's a hard build, but that's really, really powerful. That you can have coordinators rather than intermediaries.
Love it. For listeners who don't know, I've been behind the scenes testing out Mash's embeddable widget right now on my site, and I'm hoping to have in the next week or so, don't hold me to a deadline, listeners, but I'm hoping to have transcripts of every episode of this podcast where you can read through full transcripts, and you can pay through Mash. So that'll be pretty cool. Looking forward to testing that one out shortly. But I want to get into one thing I'm noticing now in the Lightning space is like there are a lot of creator tools or wallets, payment platforms. The words kind of blur together a little bit in Lightning because it seems like a lot of things can do a lot of different applications. How do you think about differentiating yourself from browser extensions, wallets, payment platforms? There's a few of them in the space. We have Albi, we have Zebedee, mostly like a gaming focused one. We have Fountain for podcasters. How does Mash fit in? Where's your niche?
So first, I think we're so early in this new change of how the internet's going to be funded. And so I look at it as there's all the companies today and thousands more that can exist and support lots of different experiences and features, and whether they're going to build on top of something like Mash, or they're going to interoperate with another experience like Albi, or they're just going to be able to send funds between them. I just think we're so early. The other, just talking about a little bit about the different products that you mentioned. So Albi, well, I don't want to speak about what different companies do because I don't go into detail or follow them per se. My understanding is they're an extension that allows consumers to connect a node or get a wallet and pay for things that have different protocols installed on their site. So there's definitely a similarity there in terms of the belief in value for value and paying for quality. We're focused, and then Zebedee, they're focused on gaming, allowing games to embed, whether it's play to earn or Bitcoin directly in their games for different actions and events. And I think that's actually the most similar one to what Mash is doing, where we're allowing any app developer, any builder to really monetize a different type of interaction or experience in a lot of different ways, and then developers to build experiences on top of that to monetize. The consumer wallet piece is just an enabler for them and to help them have users rather than rely on only the number of people with certain nodes or a wallet that might not connect and provide the right interactions to make it seamless and enjoyable to contribute while you're engaging, or like pay as you enjoy without 3 clicks every time. And then the other part that you mentioned is things are purpose built. I think the best products are built for a specific type of use case. And again, I don't know the plans or the goals or the strategies of all these companies. You might have, Blue Wallet for in-person retail purchases, or et cetera, et cetera. That's very, very different than what we're doing. And I think there's lots of landscape available to provide really, really cool things that have never existed before.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is kind of shocking how early we are today. I still can't have a conversation about Lightning with a non-Bitcoiner and have any of this stuff make sense. So you're right. We are very, very early still. I want to think though about, at a time when Lightning is mature and everyone's using it and you have a bunch of creators on the platform, what different types of creators do you think will be earning on Mash? Like who's going to be if you can kind of segment the internet into all the different kinds of content we have today. We have podcasters, we have news outlets, we have YouTubers, all these different kind of sub niches. Who's going to be the first one to adopt Mash?
So I sort of try and break it up into 2 high-level categories. There's the Bitcoiners across the board who want to experiment with Lightning, whether it's selling transcripts, selling an access to an email, a voting widget or tool for people to express their interest in something, a community jar, a way to engage in a circular economy there. And there's a lot of really interesting experimentation where we can learn a lot of new things. The other side, if we tried to, segment the current internet or the potential internet, whether it's news and information, guides, whether it's video, audio, written, or whether it's different apps and tools like a calculator or a converter for code or a map creator, emoji meme creator, or like a little game for getting jokes, and lots more that don't exist because they never have been able to monetize, of which I could talk at length about the different things that I think will exist, but we need to see what happens and where people's interests lie. I think it's the tools that provide it's really about what provides significant value to a user. Those are the ones that are going to convert first, where a user is willing to pay for something because they enjoy it. It could be educational serialized content, or it could be that map maker, that fantasy map maker like Incarnate that I've been looking at as like premium mods, or downloading Sims content. Like there's so many different things. And it's just about, I think, we can almost define where it starts in some ways. If let's say there's 10 categories on the internet and there's 3 that are really good fits. If we build the best product for one of them, I think we can learn a lot and engage from there and then shift over. So that was pretty abstract, but I just think it's such a broad landscape, and we're going to build some, but then allow developers to build on top of us to help uncover all of those, because we're never going to be smart enough to figure out every single niche and vertical. We're not experts in everything, and we never can be.
Right. What do you think will be some of the constraints in getting to those first, 3 different segments on the internet? Like, what's the challenge you guys are going to face? I guess if we're thinking these are not necessarily Bitcoiners, how do you educate? How do you onboard these people to adopt Mash?
Have a conversation, show them the value versus what they have now. They experiment, case studies, show that they're earning 20 to 50x more than the alternative, and keep on going. And so it sounds simple. It's not easy to do, because if you try and cold email 1,000 people, you're not getting lots of responses, no matter how amazing it is. I don't know about you, or everyone here, how much their inbox is full with just please unsubscribe my entire domain responses. Yeah. But I think part of it is coming here and sharing with people to have folks experiment with us who want to try it out. And that's what we're doing right now. It's actually, since we made an announcement of our fundraise recently, the inbound's been incredible. And so if you haven't got an email back from me yet, even though it's been over a week, I will, or when this gets released 2 weeks, I am working on it. And so, yeah, it's just have conversations, learn, get it live.
Yeah. Is there any magic to the idea of, funding with fiat is something you can do on Mash right now, I believe. You can fund with a credit card. You can kind of like load your wallet. Is that something you think is like an important thing to get non-Bitcoiners into the loop and kind of on board without having to worry about the technical details of Bitcoin and Lightning?
I think there's 2 pieces to that. So there's like this match that we're trying to coordinate and facilitate, where it's this app, this experience, this tool, this content is awesome, and someone wants to access it and pay for it. And if we limit it to only people who have, let's say, a Lightning node, or who only have this wallet, or X, Y, and Z as a funding mechanism, now imagine you're that builder or creator. You're going to say, what % of people are not going to be able to pay me easily? And so that's what we're solving there. But while it's not launched yet, we want to have it that, right now it's you buy a wallet, which effectively is like you're buying software that runs a Lightning wallet for you to have access to funds, or you have a wallet, and we give you a Bitcoin bonus that you get instantly available so you can use it without interruption. But we want to have a way where it's you can actually just send money right in from anywhere else, or connect a node on your side, or connect a different wallet where they're interoperating based on different protocols that are available and exist today. And so we've spent a lot of time building our platform in a way that we ideally we just coordinate invoices, which is like in the back end what Lightning does. We're not actually doing anything beyond that.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you think about, so we talked about like the types of creators that might be first to adopt MASH and kind of like what that progression might look like. What about who's not going to be affected by this? Like, is there anyone on the internet immune to this kind of monetization? Is there any business model that kind of can still persist and succeed by not kind of doing this direct audience funding monetization business model?
So I think there's two pieces. There's flavors of direct funding, and is it a core business model, or is it an add-on or a premium version model? And I want to hit a few different segments. There's like the big bundles, the Netflixes, the of the world, or the Disneys of the world. And they sort of do it with like in-app payments and different games and different things that they might be a part of, whether it's like maybe that doesn't apply to Netflix, but I don't think this impacts them very much. There's, let's say, newspapers and large outlets. Now, if you have compelling journalism and information that people will pay for, whether it's like a Substack that people will engage with, I look at that as a prepay experience for that creator and builder is actually tremendously more valuable to them to earn a living in lots of cases, not all. And then we get back to certain undifferentiated content or generalized news or generalized updates or whether it's like you're reposting Reuters content with a little bit on top of it. The delta in what one group might provide versus another isn't differentiated enough to monetize directly from consumers. So I think there's like the things that get lots of views, the millions upon millions of views that ads actually can make sense and isn't necessarily super differentiated, won't necessarily switch over, but there might be micro niches below it that are way better at what they do for a very specific target audience. So like the best parallels, newspapers are great, let's say for the average person, regardless of what, I'm saying as an analogy, regardless of what you think about the trustworthiness of that content. And then a Substack by X person is tremendously valuable for a much smaller set, but that person would make way more money doing that. So there's going to be an unbundling going on.
Right. So in a way, is this similar to how companies like Shopify and Etsy have given like niche creators of physical items or niche builders, they've given them a platform to monetize their business in a dramatically improved fashion, and you guys are doing something similar for digital creators. Is that kind of a comparison I can make?
Yeah, I think you said it as better than how I would have described it. But yes, there's a missing middle of the internet, and you have ad funded, and you have subscription, large upfront purchase, and there's this other interactive value for quality for payment type of world that is going to exist, and we want to help power it. And then there's these add-on engagement-driven experiences where you can actually, you can see some platforms will be impacted by, they can control a group of builders and creators where it's micro distributions, where we're going to take $20 a month, and then we're going to decide based on the attention you give each one, how much we distribute. And the best ones from those platforms, if the distribution isn't good enough, will say, oh, I want to own and control my own experience, price it the right way, get paid based on quality, add all these different interactions for payments or different premium experiences, and shift to my own world. So I think you'll see an unbundling of some of these types of whether it's educational content. I think that's a natural one.
Yeah. So do you think, like, does this unbundle traditional schools, do you think? Like, how far does this idea of unbundling extend? If we have anyone can pay for any content on the internet, what's the impact, I guess?
I haven't thought about the school one. I know a lot of people are tackling unbundling schools, so I'm not going to weigh in there. It's so far afield for my area of expertise. But what I think this does is when you start rewarding quality, and the people who create quality experiences start earning more, they can invest more in quality experiences. People go to them more. The ones that are, not quality get less views, less attention. They don't people start avoiding them. SEO doesn't matter as much because they're using word of mouth or trusted sources of information for places to go to. And you can imagine a world where the internet is, the experiences that exist there are a lot more enjoyable and trustworthy, and accessible.
Right. What happens to the ad industry if MASH succeeds? Like, what's going to be the impact on, Google and Facebook and some of the, it's a huge ad machine right now that runs a lot of the content on the internet is monetized that way. What are the biggest impacts that will be felt from that?
So I think ads will always exist. And they do provide value in some cases for people to find things that are relevant to them and to get reminded. Like it does, like ads aren't always good. In the way they exist online, though, it's pretty bad. So I think you might see that adjusting where a quality, like think of the brand image of the places showing these ads these ways right now is. You might see a much more curated ad experience where it limits it to better experiences, where it's not taking up 80% of the screen for everything, except for the sites that always will have it because they're not providing anything of value. But I also think you'll see a shift of attention and users going to places with ads. So, I don't think this impacts, like, let's say direct response or like search result ads. I don't necessarily think it will impact brand ads in terms of where they can show and the frequency and the inventory of it. In terms of affiliate, I call it affiliate farming ads, which is here's the top 10X, go buy them. And it's only just like scraping Amazon content. I hope that industry goes away, but I don't think it will. Maybe for some segments, some sub-segments it will. But the goal here is to help enable people who provide, the actual useful information to earn versus the people who have AI scraping information and buying robot farms for links.
Right. So quality content is going to see a massive uptick in like how effective it can be to monetize, and then maybe some of the commoditized stuff may disappear, may not. It may just kind of like float around and just kind of like just not, maybe that doesn't have that much of a change to it.
Yeah.
Is that the idea?
Yeah. And then there's also I try and take the logic of people who have money want to have good stuff and are willing to pay for it. Mm-hmm. Ads are usually useful only to target people who have money who will eventually click on that, learn about it, buy something online or offline, which is all tracked right now. Now, if all the people who have the money who can spend a little bit to enjoy something and those people earn way more, how valuable are those ad slots?
Right.
That still exists. I'm not going to prophesize the end of advertising online. It's going to be a huge driver of the economy. I just look at it being not as important for people who are building new things.
Yeah. Now, when you're thinking about the opportunity size here, and if you're thinking about disrupting the way money and information moves on the internet, what framework do you use to think about how big that opportunity is?
It's almost as though if you're starting, I think Shopify is a great example. And you say, I'm going to enable e-commerce online for any merchant or anyone who sells anything. How big is that? If you're asking that question 5 years ago. So I try and look at it as is this massive? Could this be massive? And I say, yes, absolutely. We're talking about transformative change. And so to put it into like perspective, it's like, oh, there's $600 billion in e-commerce. There's per year. There's $200 billion or a little bit less in display ads. People are spending $800 billion in content and media, which is like movies, music, and games. Now, you imagine you allow that to proliferate where the indie hackers and the different mini app builders and the content creators can actually charge for their experiences and earn their value instead of spending 4 years and making $25K and giving up. Imagine that happens and the power law is not this steep. What all of us as consumers get versus funded disinformation or abandoned projects. So I look as there's, 20,000 new apps built a month launched on Product Hunt. Like I'm just going through numbers here that are just, there's 2 million people building bubble apps. There's 30 million developers. Tons are doing side hustles. Imagine that like JSON image converter that's amazing, or that screenshot taker that I saw the other day could actually earn value versus subscription. I think you break that purchase barrier, that commitment barrier. And it's that's why also I say at the beginning there, which of these verticals do you target, or where's the first ones? There's lots that this fits in, and I think we'll get lots of answers really quickly.
Right. Now, what are you thinking when you think about, judging the opportunity size and then thinking about where that opportunity comes from? Is that primarily from creating new opportunities for people to monetize where none existed? Or is it also pulling, demand away from things like Patreon and Substack in the process?
I think those models make a lot of sense for a lot of people and a lot of builders and creators, but don't for many that might have tried them in the past, or they can be augmented by something that Mash enables. So it's less of pull from X product to Y product, because I don't think those products meet the needs of lots of people very, very well. They're still subscription-based. They're still a minimum purchase. They're still, here's a separate world that is controlled with my special content. I'm talking about more generalized uses that can be used anywhere in the control of the builder and creator. And so I think there's a very big difference with that.
Right. Now, I want to talk about, use an example of Shopify we've used a couple times. Shopify, how do we think about, I want to get a sense for the network effects here. And so if we're using the example of doing what Shopify did for e-commerce, for digital creators, how do you think about the network effects and building a moat around the business? Because clearly Shopify has built a moat, and it has a successful business, and they're one of the I believe they're the largest company in Canada right now. How do you then think about building a sustainable moat and network effect around this product at such an early stage in the life cycle of Lightning, and at such an early stage in the monetization of internet native content?
So I've thought about it at a high level a bit, which is, but at the same time, day in and day out, we're focused on the nuts and bolts of providing value to the creators and builders and the consumers that are, going to be part of this ecosystem. So I think that is step one. And then if you're, there's this unique thing with Lightning where it's interoperable money. The money's not locked in. So we're always going to have to provide the best facilitation of those experiences between those two parties. But then you could say, okay, if you have this many wallets on the consumer side, then why would someone who wants to earn for their value decide to go with someone else who doesn't have it? So they'll have a bootstrap problem. So you're having people switch money, not because the money's not interoperable, it will be. It's because there's a friction point that we'll solve earlier. The other one is, as we build out all these different widgets and components and unique ways to monetize that people can, implement in a variety of ways and let developers build on top of it, you might have an ecosystem advantage. But at the same time, they'll be able to plug that in with other experiences, because it's all about interoperability. That is the way I look at, Web 3 or Web 4 or Web 5, whatever we want to call this thing, where you're not locked into an aggregator or a platform. And so if someone is unhappy with Mash, they're going to be able to remove the code and they're off to the races with whatever they want. And so it's always going to be about providing the best quality experience for both sides of this equation.
Right. So I guess one way to almost enforce a bit of a moat around the business could just be as you mentioned, if I and a million other creators all have Mash embeddable widgets in our site, it's not likely that the next consumer, the marginal consumer, is going to be setting up a different, getting on a different platform if they know that everyone's using Mash and it's a seamless integration already. Is that kind of the idea?
So let's say every single podcaster in the world has Mash for these types of experiences, and you decide as the last one you want to monetize with Mash for like people to vote on the next guest, and if that guest comes on, it goes to a donation or something, and like there's some sort of thing you're doing.
Yeah.
Are you going to choose instead of Mash, you're choosing like Mush or I don't know, another thing, or are you going to choose the one that already has all of the relevant users there, or one that doesn't have the same widgets and different monetization options? They don't have that widget, but that's the one you want. And so I think, you know, once you get to a certain build out, it becomes very difficult for people to, you know, do the go-to-market, build a product that's better without the learnings. It's like any startup. Why doesn't YouTube or Google copy it, or Facebook or Amazon? It's, well, they don't have the internal knowledge, the drive, and the sheer focus to get to a point where you're just providing so much tremendous differentiated value.
And so even though all this is interoperable, right? Like this has been like a point of tension in my head for a little while, thinking about like how, you know, we can have something that's entirely interoperable, anyone can access it, and we can also have businesses that can form sustainable business models. I'm like, how's this going to work? But I see that a little more clearly now, that there can be, both can exist at the same time.
Yes, but it's also think what the ramifications of that. It forces anyone building in the space to be that much better, to provide that much of a better experience for all parties. It's less of the, you got to this scale, I guess you're the platform winner. Every VC in the Valley funds all the same ones. They don't fund the other ones. I mean, I don't know if that's the case though, but whatever. That's what some personalities have been saying, but I don't necessarily believe it. Anyways, they'll scale that one up, they win the market, right? It's like aggregation theory. You can still have that in some ways, but the person who is running those the people who are running those businesses, just like anything, it is sort of a click away. And if you don't continue to provide something amazing,
right,
the funds.
So do you think that changes the way people build businesses? Because there is, you know, this, like it is a competition for quality, and it's a much more level playing field for new participants. Do you think that changes like the structure of companies and the way companies are going to be building experiences for potential consumers?
Anything that involves value transfer, yes.
Interesting.
Because if you're talking about value transfer and stored value, are you going to be locked into this thing they can only use here, or something that can talk to anything?
Right.
So anything that touches this, I think, will be impacted.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned early on was, I believe it's pay as you enjoy is the kind of like the business model, the approach here. What makes that the right approach? You know, there are a few different forms of value for value, or different flavors of value for value on the internet today. One being the one we're doing on this podcast now, where listeners can simply send in sats as they enjoy the content, you know, without any expectations or any limitations, whatever, right? Entirely voluntary. And then this is a pay-as-you-enjoy model where it's more like, you know, I get the impression it's more like a paywall, or like a you know, you can access the content if you pay a certain amount. And I think there's a bunch of other different formats being tested right now. I think John Carvalho has a podcast where he does a crowd-funded paywall where like everyone can contribute to unlocking an episode. What makes pay-as-you-enjoy the right business model for you guys?
So pay-as-you-enjoy actually is sort of meant to be a bucket that covers all of that. It could be like donate as you go, or donate as you enjoy, or boost whenever you want, or community enjoyment. That one fits for like usage-based pricing, which was the first structure that we put out. But all of those things that you mentioned and a lot more, we're enabling, and we're working on and trying to make it as easy as you copy and paste a snippet of code, and you've now added that to your experience for all of them on your site or on a site that we can spin up. So I think those are all pay as you enjoy. And a paywall, That term's gone in a bad rep. So we're trying to avoid, like, we're not trying to use that in how we talk about it, but it could be pay as you scroll down past a certain point, and then after 2 seconds it unlocks and someone contributes if they set up a budget, or they can click and undo and they have control over their funds on the consumer side, and then you remove any click. And so we're going to work on a lot of different interaction points that make it as seamless as possible for both parties. But that's all pay as you enjoy in my eyes.
Yeah. And do you think about, like, in those different kind of verticals, whether it's a crowd wall or paywall or whatever the term we want to use, or traditional like value for value donations, which do you think we'll see the most adoption from for consumers? I guess it probably depends on the different use cases, but what are you most excited about? What are you most looking forward to?
So the high level of what I'm most looking forward to is people who create awesome things getting paid fairly. And it's way more than today, unless you're like right at the top of the curve. But in terms of, okay, let's say there's pay per use, pay per time, donate button, donate as you go, donate boost. Like, there's a bunch of categories. It's hard to say what the mix is. I think those are all going to be very large. I don't think the crowdfunding model I think that will be the smallest. I do think that, I'd probably anchor on pay, like, I don't want to call it paid walls, but pay per usage access and time as being the largest, because that's really it's less voluntary. It's more of, this thing's so amazing, I'm definitely contributing to it. And I think we're moving into that world where people aren't going to sacrifice their scarce time for something that's subpar.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Voltage. Voltage is the industry standard for Lightning Network infrastructure. Creating layer 2 applications and services on top of Bitcoin starts with Voltage, where you can spin up nodes, get access to liquidity, optimize your node, and much more. Voltage is leading the way as the next generation provider of Lightning Network infrastructure. And if you want to get a free trial and start using Voltage today, you can do so at voltage.cloud. Okay, so we talked about how creators are going to be able to earn a fair share, right? Earn more than they could using ads. And when I look around the internet, I see ad rates on things like YouTube and podcasts, and they vary, but I've noticed, maybe it's $10 to $100 per 1,000 views or something like that. Maybe it's lower on Google. What do you think of, when you think about like growing that amount for a creator, how much can that amount grow by, and how much can you take a creator's earnings from level X to 5X? How do you think about where that ceiling is? Can you take from X to 10X or 50X or 100X? How do you think about that?
So we've looked at there's a lot of different tools online to see what those rates are. And it's like, how many YouTube views do you need to make like $500? Is it like 10 million? Like, it's pretty astronomical, the number of views you need, and then the amount of corruption you get to your experience to rely on ads. But we look at, but it's not just brand ads, it's also affiliate marketing. And sort of, we look at a few things. One is, what are those rates for those segments? And then, how good is this information experience that someone's willing to pay for, engage in a variety of different ways? And so you can sort of compare the two. And when we were looking at it, and then looking at data from, let's say, subscriptions or other paid for experiences, you could say, is it reasonable that a lot of these different services, you could do 20, 50x more earnings for the person who's creating it? And I believe the answer is 100% yes. The other part of it is, you can use something like Mash as an add-on experience where you don't have to remove every ad. You can still have, affiliate stuff for some and not for others, and have like premium experiences. It doesn't have to be choose one or the other. We just think that this is completely additive, and some will remove all ads completely and some won't.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, let's get into Mash, the company, and I want to get your sense for how you think about building startups, because now you did your outdoor adventure company, you built that, and now you're building Mash, and we're at an interesting point in the Bitcoin market today where, interest in the asset has kind of plummeted a bit, and there's a lot of volatility and, fear in the market, I guess, let's say. How do you think about building a Bitcoin startup and then building a Bitcoin startup knowing that you're going to have these moments of bear market and like fear and doubt? How does that change the way you build a startup?
So I think the first is I want to build the best team to do whatever I'm doing. People I want to work around, people who push me, people who are incredibly intelligent and curious and driven. And how do you have to build a team like that? And step one is have a really big, important, and achievable or believably achievable mission. And so that was step one. Then step two is, talk to those people, have a good reputation for people you've worked with in the past, and have them join you and start building things awesome that people want to try and use and join. And now the other question is about, okay, Bitcoin in a bear market or Bitcoin not in a bear market. I think about it, there's the, almost store of value, or Bitcoin as a monetary or asset or savings vehicle, bull versus bear market. And people think of that in what's the price of the asset or what institutions or countries have adopted it. I don't think we're in a bear market for Lightning. Maybe a bear market for funding Lightning companies from some VCs, although I don't even know if that's the case. That could be, could not be.
That's true.
We are a very rapidly, it's a very small but rapidly growing community of people who see this, who are building on top of it in a similar ethos, but different flavors of it for different products and users. And so the more products that are out there, the more interoperability, the more users that have access and try Lightning, the better. And also there's been socialization of Bitcoin over the past 2 to 5 years that's been really helpful, I think, and will be really helpful to all of these companies. Lightning, not so much, it's starting. So I think we're in a bull market for Lightning experiences, a bear market for personal savings, but that's just means there's a fire sale if I get some currency down the line. So I'm absolutely fine with it.
That makes sense. And you're right. I think all the Lightning metrics are headed upwards right now. And maybe this is a point where, I've kind of been frustrated a little bit because I haven't seen much acknowledgement of this differentiation between Lightning stuff and Bitcoin stuff, and maybe even Lightning and Bitcoin and the rest of crypto. Like, it seems like these are now headed in very different directions, have very different levels of adoption. Like, we think about DeFi apps and things like that on other chains, and usage plummeting as soon as price comes down. And then we look over at Lightning and we go, price may be down 50, 60, 70% for Bitcoin, but usage remains at all-time highs for a lot of apps, continually setting new records. So I guess it may be just that, do you think that these are just different economies forming and we're slowly realizing that they should be separated into different entities?
I think different frames of mind of thinking about it. What does a bear market mean? So one is what's the attention to Web3 and crypto and DeFi? It's I guess follow the money, follow the incentives. They're going to get the attention, and that's fine. And there's the size of the community building in a space, maybe without all the media and the attention. Doesn't mean the community's not growing. It's been seeded. And so I just like to think of them as different things, as a founder and someone who's working with an awesome team of folks to build these new use cases. And so there's new companies, new use cases being built. There's not just a few of them, there's tons that are building in the space, and there's way more people that are starting to wake up to it that are going to join. So there's more talent. There's so many more absolutely incredible people that wouldn't have given it a thought are now starting to realize that this is the best kept secret in terms of changing the fabric of the internet.
Mm-hmm. When you think about, tying this back to Mash as a company and thinking about Bitcoin the asset, do you think that Bitcoin the asset can give you an advantage in, maybe in moments like this where prices are down significantly, maybe that's not so much the case, but over the long run, do you think that having Bitcoin, and being in the Bitcoin ecosystem can give you an advantage of staying focused and being able to build for a long time horizon, knowing that this is something that can't be inflated away, and this is, like holding Bitcoin, is that part of a strategy for Lightning startups? Like, what's your sense for like how important Bitcoin the asset is to Mash and other Lightning startups building in the space?
So Bitcoin, the asset, needs to have value for people to want to have it in wallets to spend and use it, and needs to have positive perception. So that's going to, as we grow, as you go outside of a community that understands it, I think that's going to be very important in terms of, storing, let's say, Bitcoin in the balance sheet. I feel like for security purposes, I shouldn't say, acknowledge or deny the question, but there's expenses that, while some people would want to get paid in Bitcoin, their end line expenses are in fiat currency. And so we don't want to be in a situation as a company where we put the company at risk by, risking all of our assets in something that's volatile relative to expenses, not volatile relative to what we believe long-term value is. That being said, having an allocation of funds into what we believe is the future monetary asset of the world, the best savings vehicle, the best money ever conceivable that's been created and realized, which is sort of the fact that it survived and it is what it is, and has such a high percentage of succeeding, like astronomically high relative to anyone who would have asked on year one, is absolutely incredible. And so I think it's important, but then there's also, if you built on other things, those other things are generally going to die. There's like a bunch of really good articles about, tokens, and they just go down to the lowest value to support the use case on the chain. And then if there's no chain, there's no value. And then you start trading off security, and you might as well just go to a database. Like, I'm not saying that's for everything, but I haven't seen anything that it's not for. So based on the properties, I'm not saying the end outcome of the result, based on the properties of what was created. So
yeah. So I guess my question would be, like, to clarify the last question, if there was Mash and then there was a clone of Mash with their own token, and then there was a clone of Mash with, entirely operating on fiat, does Bitcoin give Mash like an advantage, a moat around it, just because of the asset?
100%. So let's do Mash with the Mash token. Okay, what do we need to secure in a blockchain? I couldn't for the life of me figure out what it is, but let's say that's the means, like the value, means of exchange. It's like just saying put Bitcoin Cash in it, just we pre-mined it all ourselves. So trying to build up that network and having any credibility for anyone to use it and then explain to them what this new little token thing is in it to any user, it's dead on arrival. Yeah. The next one, which is fiat, try managing global interoperable payments that are censorship resistant, usable anywhere. It's not gonna, like, it doesn't work.
Nightmare.
Now, could you take fiat, whether you do value with like hedging in different countries and different things to give users the actual value, or do like rapid transfers with the different partners? Yeah, absolutely. To get them on board and then help them understand and start riding the Bitcoin wave, if that's a marketing angle we want to say, if they get options. But really it's about Bitcoin has the other part of it is, when I go to interoperability, it's embedded density. I can now take this in any country in the world, send it to a different exchange, send it to a different product, send it to my own wallet, give it to a friend by an email address. Like, these things do not exist. There is no community like this that believes in these types of principles. So in the long run, it's not just the asset, it's also the community that is a order of magnitude competitive advantage.
Right. Yeah, I think you're 100% right there. And, it also, I guess, reduces a lot of the technical, technical debt you have to take on to like manage, especially a fiat world, the managing of money between all the different banks and counterparties and restrictions on, who can send money to who and all the fees associated with it. It would be a nightmare just of complexity to think about.
Like, I have to send money to some friends in the States frequently, and they just say, like, send it over Cash App. It's like,
can't.
I can't do that. Oh, do you e-transfer? I have Interac. Like, how do I send you money? It's like, I'm pretending doing like an international remittance that takes 3 days. I'm like wiring money to like wise.com and then sending it to their email address. They're signing up for an account. It's like, I owe the guy $100.
Yeah.
It's
just so much easier to send over Lightning.
Yeah.
I want to touch on one topic we've talked about a little bit, is Web3 and Web5 actually as well. I want to hear what your high-level assessment of these movements are, because I think Web3, the term, has mostly been, something that other chains have kind of congregated around and said, oh, we're building the next internet or whatever, right? Like, we're going to build the Web3. Bitcoiners have also taken to that and said, well, actually, maybe Web3 is built on Lightning. And then we have Web5 that just came out last week, and this is now, we got decentralized identity being built basically without any token involved, although Ion does plug into Bitcoin. What's your assessment of like those two different movements and whether or not either is going to persist in the long run?
I almost start with, I can't even tell you what is the metaverse, what is Web3, what is Web5, what is X, and there's a site called Epsilon Theory. Ben Hunt's a prolific author there. I think him and a few folks run it, and they talk about narratives a lot. And it's almost like, let's group all these things as the new hot thing. It's like AI companies that honestly were just using regex or just using like people like typing in words, and it was called AI. I look at that as a marketing or a bucketing or a way to create familiarity with people, because we're in many ways pattern recognition animals. And so all now the fancy cool stuff is just called Web3, even though, or it's just called DeFi, even though some of them are algorithmic Ponzi's. And so I don't know. So there's the one is, I don't even know how to describe what those things are, let alone to say what the future holds. But if we think of like some of the primitives of like decentralized identity, it'd be unfair of me to anyone listening to give a strong point of view, given the amount of digging I've done on it. I haven't done my research, as Bitcoiners say, like, do your own research. I haven't done my own research enough to have a strong point of view to share.
Fair enough. I guess a more broad question to ask would be like, do you think we're in need of or approaching a shift in the way the internet works? Like, do you think the fabric of the internet changes in the next few years? Maybe it's due to Lightning, maybe it's due to decentralized identity, maybe it's due to something else. But like, I think there was the Web 1 and Web 2 movements were like clear changes in the way the internet worked for people. Do you think we're ready for another change that this is going to be something that affects like the fabric of the internet?
Yes.
Okay.
We're injecting value into the internet. That's only one of the things that are going on right now. A lot of it is also societal, whether you trust the sources of information or you trust the entities. So if you looked at like how hardened Facebook was 5 years ago versus it today, and the impact it's had on people's, let's say, mental health or information sources, I think there's going to be, the entire fabric's going to change, and we're going to move away from the aggregator or platform controlled, platform locked in model to a much more decentralized model. So maybe it's more fragmented, unbundled with different styles, but I couldn't tell you if this is a year away and rapid or 20 years away, but it's going to happen. It needs to happen.
Yeah. So whether we call it Web 3, Web 5, or whatever it is, there is going to be a fundamental change to the way the internet works for everyone.
Yes. Yes.
I like
and
it.
These changes are happening faster and faster than I think they have ever happened before.
Yeah. All right. This is really good stuff. I'm glad we got to go through all this. I want to get into a new segment that I do called the Lightning Round. Are you ready for it?
As ready as I'll ever be.
Welcome to the Lightning Round, presented by Zebedee, your portal into the world of Bitcoin gaming. The Zebedee app offers a full-featured Lightning wallet, seamlessly integrated with your own personal gamer tag, so that you can earn Bitcoin on all of Zebedee's games on mobile and desktop. It's never been more fun to earn Bitcoin, and Zebedee is your key to it all. To claim your personal gamer tag and start earning some Bitcoin of your own, download the Zebedee app today. First question for you. Your background is in outdoor adventure. I wanna hear a recommendation for the best outdoor adventure trip you've ever been on.
Okay. Well, I won't say it's accessible for most. About probably 5 years ago, I flew up into the Northwest Territories, into the Mackenzie Mountains with 5 of my best friends, and we paddled the mountain river. So you have to float plane on like a puddle jumper, about like, I think it's like a 400 kilometers or 400 miles through the basically mountains and canyons in the middle of the Northwest Territories. So that's like the wildest experience I've ever been on. But if you're, Ontario and Quebec and Canada are really the lands of lakes and rivers. So if you want to paddle, I'd come here. I'm a river rat, but something accessible for most people is Barron Canyon on the east side of the park. Or you could go to the Amably Dauphin area, which is large, huge, beautiful lakes. And it's definitely a lot safer. Do not go do that other thing that I will not rename.
I like it. Are there any books that have meaningfully changed your view of the world?
Well, I think I can say yes, the Bitcoin Standard, but that's probably a lot of people will say that. I want to say it changed my view. I'd say it hardened and sort of validated it. Was The Misbehavior of Markets by Mandelbrot. So he's a famous mathematician. And so I'd highly recommend it. It is sort of technical, but it helps people understand power law curves. It helps people understand sort of the randomness in markets versus like drawing a line to predict where things will go. So I'm not a believer in technical analysis, things like that. And I think it's a really smart book that will open people's eyes on how to think about randomness.
Do you think we will see one of the major social networks entirely drop their ad funding model and adopt something like Mash or some direct audience funding model?
Platforms and companies have a very difficult time cannibalizing themselves, especially at scale. So I don't see any of them dropping their ad-funded models, but I could see an acceleration for the types of use cases they provide of enabling different types of paid-for experiences, whether it's, YouTube Premium. I don't even know the name, even though I get the advertisement 5 times a day.
Yeah.
So,
and I guess Twitter has Twitter Blue, right? They have a little pay to get rid of ads or something.
Yes, but those are like one-time remove this thing. It's not pay for this because it's 10x better.
Yeah.
So I think they will do it, but it'll be maybe a smaller part of the business than we think it will be, unless they create new things like Twitter buying the Substack competitor. What is it? Get Review. I have no idea how big that business is or how big the subscription model is versus generic views and advertising. But I see most of this activity happening off of those platforms.
Right. Interesting. What is something that you believe that few Bitcoiners agree with you on?
It's hard because I don't know how to qualify, like, what is a Bitcoiner? I have to think about this for a second. Oh, I don't believe in now, as of, like, maybe people will say it now because of where the market, the exchange rate is. I don't believe that cycles or halvings matter anymore. I look at it as both the size of the asset class in terms of fiat currency, the adoption by institutions, the fact that miners hold their funds, but really the big thing is the percent of mined Bitcoin as a percent of the total. It used to be, I forget the percentages off the top of my head, but like if you're doing 20% inflation per year versus like 0.5% inflation, or going from 1 to 0.5, it sort of becomes immaterial, except for a psychological push. But I don't think it matters anymore. I think we're going to go past this halving date, and nothing. There's going to be no impact other than my Twitter feed will fill up for a few days, and then a few days after.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting. Like, I think you're right in the sense that like a lot of Bitcoiners will disagree, But I think there is a point to be made. Like maybe the last halving didn't even have an impact, because Bitcoin was mostly fluttering around 8,000-10,000 after the halving for a couple months after. In fact, it was like we saw MicroStrategy buying Bitcoin and then Square buying Bitcoin, and that was actually a lot tighter linked to the actual rise in price than the halving from 3 or 4 months prior to that. So who knows? Maybe it wasn't even impactful this time around.
I could maybe get behind that. I'd have to do a little look back,
Yeah, MicroStrategy was August 11th, I believe they announced their first buy, and Twitter was September, or not Twitter, Square was September.
Yeah.
And then the price, we really picked up in October, November, and it's like the halving was back in May. That was like 6 months ago.
Yeah, but maybe
Almost.
it takes a bit of time to like reverberate through the miners and through the system. I don't know. It's also one of these things that no one can prove. I think I just tweeted yesterday, it was like correlation equals causation as a joke, because it's hard to prove anything with absolute fact. It's
right.
We see patterns, and hopefully we're right most of the time.
Yeah. Okay, final question. If you had to hold all of your wealth in one asset, it couldn't be Bitcoin, you got to hold it for 10 years, which asset are you picking?
I have two questions. One is, do I have a home to live in, and do I have a salary to, pay for things? And you know how liquid the money is.
I would say use your current situation. Do you have a home to live in, and do you have a salary to depend on?
Does MicroStrategy count, or as a Bitcoin holdings or an ETF?
You could choose to invest in MicroStrategy if you want.
Okay, so what do I have to leave that has the, but there's like not your keys, not your coin, but like over 10 years, sure, I'll go MicroStrategy unless, Square announces that they amped up their balance. No, I'll go MicroStrategy. I can't think of anything else close.
MicroStrategy's been beaten down recently. I mean, that may prove to be, I think they're trading below the net holdings they have. So that actually may be like it is technically a levered position on Bitcoin, but it may be, that you're actually getting more than what you deserve because they've been beaten down so hard in the last couple weeks.
That is true. I'm trying to think of like, what is the biggest, there's the levered position, which I'm not worried about. I don't think there's any risk in 5 years of being liquidated, or I get 50% of the value instead of 150% of the value. So I'll take that risk, although it's not redeemable and I don't hold it. So then ETF might be better. Actually, the biggest risk I think with MicroStrategy is like political risk for Michael Saylor. What happens if Michael Saylor is not in charge of MicroStrategy anymore? That is the biggest risk factor, that it might just put me into like an ETF in Canada for Bitcoin. So I'm flip flopping here. I don't have an answer. I would put I need to look. I need to think through that.
Yeah, no, it's a tricky question. All right, well, listen, this was an incredible conversation. I'm glad we got to go through all this in detail. I think people are going to really like what you're building, and I'm excited to launch the transcripts on my own site for this episode and for all the other episodes of the show. Real quick before we go, where can people go to learn more about you and Mash?
Sure. So you can check out Mash's website if you want to earn money at getmash.com. If you are a consumer who wants to try out the wallet, you can sort of go there and find your way around, or go to getmash.com/wallet. I'm on Twitter, Jared, JaredNXX, or the company at GetMash. And I'm trying to think, was there anything else? Or did I shill enough of our cool stuff?
I think we're good there. Got a website and Twitter, and yeah.
I also want to say I've had a great conversation with you. I appreciate all the thorough, detailed questions, and always happy to do it again.
Thank you for taking the time, and I really hope we can do it again soon.
Awesome. Sounds great.
All right, in the last 7 days, you guys sent in 54,312 sats. Thank you to everyone who's been sending in sats. We got 23 different supporters in the last 7 days. Lots of comments, but real quick, we'll run through the top 5 supporters of the week. Mary Oscar with 28,018 sats. Peter with 15,917 sats. Verberica with 4,752 sats, Jeffrey with 1,100 sats, and Samskis with 736 sats. Again, these are the sats that I receive. I'm getting a split of the larger sats sent in to the show. We have guests getting split. We had a listener get a split on the last episode. So keep that in mind when you hear these numbers. They're actually larger than the numbers that I'm seeing. Let's run through some questions here, some comments. We have ALJAZ says, another brilliant episode, mate. Roy is a true visionary in this space. Sent in 220 sats. We have an anonymous user who says, just became a podcaster. You played a big role in that, and I even spoke with Nick, who wants to partner with my show. Thanks for being an inspiration. Hope you check out my show. And they sent their show links. Thank you to the anonymous user who sent in 440 sats as well. Happy to hear you're becoming a podcaster, and excited to see more shows on Lightning. Purple Panda says, good questions. You get deep into it on episode 51 with Roy. Thank you so much, and thank you for the 903 sats as well. TN Bloomer says, appreciate the show in response to episode 48. Thank you, TN Bloomer. Appreciate you and the sats. Mr. Johns on Breeze says, great episode with a lightning bolt. Sent in 4,189 sats on episode 51. Thank you, Mr. Johns. OK Boomer on Breeze says, thanks for the great info. Sent in 89 sats, again for the same episode with Roy. We have an anonymous user that says, thanks, mate. Sent in 4 sats. Mary Oscar sent in a bunch of lightning bolts and 95 sats. Jeffrey sent in 1,100 sats and says, thanks, Roy, for answering my question. Thanks for the sat stream, Kevin, and all. Another new word, boostception. Boosting a show where you are on the splits lists. So Jeffrey was the one who asked one of the questions in last episode, and I added Jeffrey to the show splits, and so now Jeffrey's saying he sent in sats to the show on his show split, and he gets a portion of those sats. I believe his split is 10%. So it's kind of cool. There's like a circular economy going on here. Sir Brian of London says, why does Roy publish on a censored site like Medium when he could own his content on any of the censorship-resistant, decentralized front ends to Hive, like Hive blog and things like that? I lost access to my Medium account when my Twitter account was deleted. I'm not sure. I think right now Medium has a bunch of reach. I think there's going to be decentralized versions of it that pop up. I think there are, a lot of interesting things that are being built in the personal server space that could help bloggers. If you're only storing text, you can probably store that on a Lightning node. It's probably not that hard to store it on like an Umbral device or something. You could store it in your home, and you could have your entire content library self-owned. I don't know that needs another token or another coin, but I suspect we'll see more decentralized alternatives for content hosting as time goes on. Sean Yeager says, another great conversation in response to episode 51. And that is all the comments for today. Thank you all for sending in comments and questions. I'm impressed that the number of sats sent in continues to climb, even though I'm taking a smaller and smaller percentage of the sats overall. So it's cool that all the sats that I'm receiving are also being sent out to listeners and guests, and of course Fountain and the Podcast Index. Can't wait to see what you guys send in this week, and I will see you in a couple days for the next episode with Max Webster.